Every time you've ever popped a cartridge into a console, an NES, a Super Nintendo, a Nintendo 64, a Game Boy, a Sega Genesis, you were using technology invented by a man most people have never heard of. His name was Jerry Lawson. He worked for a semiconductor company that had never made a video game in its life. And in 1976, a full year before the Atari 2600 hit shelves, he shipped the first console in history to use swappable ROM cartridges. The console was called the Fairchild Channel F. It lost the console war it started. The company that made it exited the gaming business within a few years, and the format Lawson invented went on to define how video games were sold for the next 3 decades. This is the story of getting there first and getting almost no credit for it. Act 1. The Engineer. Jerry Lawson was born in Brooklyn in 1940 and grew up taking things apart to figure out how they worked. He was largely self-taught in electronics, the kind of engineer who built his own radio equipment as a kid because he wanted to understand what was inside it, not because anyone told him to. By the late 1960s, Lawson had worked his way through several defense electronics companies before landing at Fairchild Semiconductor in 1970. Fairchild was a serious operation, one of the foundational companies of Silicon Valley, responsible for key breakthroughs in silicon transistors and integrated circuits. The name on the door mattered. The people inside had shaped what modern electronics looked like. Lawson was one of the few black engineers working in Silicon Valley at the time. He was also, by multiple accounts, exceptionally good at his job, eventually becoming chief hardware engineer and director of engineering and marketing for Fairchild's next video game division. He was also an early member of the Homebrew Computer Club, a group of engineers and hobbyists in the Bay Area who would eventually include among their number a pair of college dropouts named Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Lawson didn't just work in the industry that was being born around him. He was in the room where it happened. Act 2. The Idea. By the mid-1970s, home video game consoles existed, but they were severely limited. The Bag-to-Box Odyssey and its successors were hardwired devices. Whatever games came in the box were all you were ever going to play on that machine. When you were done with them, the console became a dust collector. Lawson had a different idea. What if the games weren't inside the console at all? What if they lived on a separate chip? A small, removable cartridge you could buy, plug in, and swap out for a different one whenever you wanted. The concept sounds obvious now, but in 1975 it was genuinely revolutionary. No consumer device had used interchangeable ROM media before. The entire business model of console gaming, buy the hardware once, buy software forever after, didn't exist yet. Lawson later said he felt like a secret agent during the development process, quietly building something without tipping off competitors. Fairchild had licensed some prototype video game technology from a company called Alpex Computer Corporation and tasked Lawson with turning it into a commercial product using their in-house F8 microprocessor. He had roughly 6 months to build something that had never been built before. Act 3. The Channel F. The Fairchild Channel F debuted at the Chicago Consumer Electronics Show in 1976, in June. It hit retail shelves in November of that year at a price of $169.95, roughly $960 in today's money. What buyers got was a genuine technological leap. The Channel F was the first home console to use a microprocessor, the first to use ROM cartridges, which Fairchild called video carts, the first to include a digital joystick, and the first home console in history to have a pause button. That last detail is worth sitting with for a moment. Before the Channel F, if you needed to stop playing a game, you turned the console off and lost your progress. Lawson's machine let you freeze the game and walk away. Something every gamer in the world takes for granted today was invented on a console almost nobody remembers. The Channel F launched with 2 built-in games, tennis and hockey, and a growing library of video carts available separately. The cartridges were bold, brightly colored, and designed to stand out on a shelf. For a brief window, late 1976 and early 1977, the Channel F was the most technologically advanced home gaming device on the market. It had done something no one else had managed. Then, the Atari launched the 2600. Act 4, The Loss. The Atari 2600 arrived in September 1977. It used the same cartridge format concept the Channel F had pioneered, swappable, ROM-based media. It was backed by Warner Communications' marketing budget, and it had something the Channel F couldn't match: a library. Atari had relationships with arcade game developers, and they had recognizable titles. When Space Invaders came to the 2600 in 1980 and console sales quadrupled, Fairchild had no equivalent answer. The Channel F sold approximately 310,000 units by 1979. Respectable, but not dominant. Fairchild was a semiconductor company, not a media company. They didn't have the infrastructure to build a gaming empire, and they weren't interested in trying. In 1979, Fairchild sold the Channel F platform to a company called Zircon International, which continued producing it through 1983. Fairchild exited the gaming business entirely and went back to what it knew: making chips. The format survived, and the company didn't. Jerry Lawson left Fairchild in 1980 and founded his own company, Videosoft, which developed software for the Atari 2600. He spent the rest of his career in the industry, never quite receiving the recognition his foundational contribution deserved. In his later years, Lawson became a voice for gaming history, appearing at conventions, giving keynotes, trying to make sure people understood what had actually been invented and by whom. He died in April 2011, at the age of 70. Google honored him with a doodle on what would have been his 82nd birthday in 2022. The gaming industry he helped build is now worth nearly $200 billion annually. The cartridge format he invented in 6 months in 1975 outlasted almost everything else from that era. Nintendo used it, Sega used it, Sony eventually abandoned it and then brought it back. The format only finally began fading when digital downloads made physical media optional. And then, even then, Nintendo kept making cartridges. There is a version of this story where Jerry Lawson is a household name, where the Channel F is remembered the same way as the Magnavox Odyssey is, as a foundational artifact, the thing that came before the thing everyone knows. That version didn't happen, but the history did.